Welcome to the Friends of Fantasy Benefits Baseball Podcast. I'm Justin Mason, lead fantasy writer and analyst at friendsoffantasybenefits.com. Joining me on this episode to preview the Chicago Cubs is Sara Sanchez of Cubbie's Bleed Blue. Wait, Bleed Cubbie's Blue. No, I said it wrong.
Bleed Cubbie Blue.
Right.
Bleed Cubbie
there
Blue.
There we go. You know what? This is one of those days. I'm sorry, Sara.
No,
welcome to the show.
You got my name right. I'm good with it.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Right? There we go. And I'm wearing blue in honor of you and talking the Cubs.
Thank you so much. We appreciate it. We appreciate
right.
your solidarity in this rough season for the Chicago Cubs.
Well, we're going to talk all about that because the Chicago Cubs have had a pretty interesting offseason in which they did not re-sign a fan favorite and let him go away to a rival, but they also brought in some talent. But before we do that, remind everybody where you can be social media and then plug everything that you do.
Yeah, you can find me at BCB_Sara on pretty much all the socials. That's my Twitter handle. But also if you're doing like the Mastodon thing or the Post thing or whatever thing we're all going to try to make happen if Elon actually fundamentally breaks Twitter, at BCB_Sara, no H on the Sara. And the website is bleedcubbieblue.com. It's part of the SB Nation family of team sites. And you can find both my writing there and you can find my podcast, Cup of Cubbie Blue, there as well. We've been doing like a once a week type of thing in the off season, but in the regular season, we review every series and preview every series to keep you up to date with what's going on with the team.
All right. Definitely follow Sara, one of my favorite people in the industry, a damn good fantasy player as well. And so she's going to help us lead through some of these Cubs players for this Cubs preview. Let's start at catcher, where you guys lost Willson Contreras to rival St. Louis. And now you're rolling with Tucker Barnhart, Yan Gomes, and PJ Higgins. Do we care about any of them for fantasy? And would you like to rant about losing Willson Contreras?
I would like to rant about losing Willson Contreras because this is definitely my villain origin story to have Willson Contreras not only not get extended by my favorite team, it's my favorite player, but to have him go to the St. Louis Cardinals and then to have to listen to a news cycle where everybody talks about how the Cardinals understand talent. And this must mean that Willson Contreras will be a great defensive catcher in St. Louis and they'll get the bat and and John Lester vouched for Willson Contreras and all of it. It's been a day. For fantasy purposes though, and for purposes of how you're looking at the Cubs catching situation, the Cubs went from getting 4 Fangraphs WAR out of their catcher spot to a projected 0.5 WAR out of their catcher spot with this move. PJ Higgins is projected for, I think, 0.1 WAR. I think that Tucker Barnhart is projected for 0.2. None of these guys is projected for a WRC plus north of 92. So like I would not be rostering any of them. I don't think Yan Gomes is going, he's like 35 at this point. I don't think he's going to play enough behind the plate to get you the plate appearances that you can get with some of the other catchers that are going before him. I really am not looking to roster any Cubs catcher in a standard roto league. And that is a damn shame because with Willson Contreras, they had not just a great hitting catcher, but one of the best hitting catchers in all of baseball. He was honestly serviceable as a DH last year. He was like the 5th or 8th best DH in the league, depending on which numbers you looked at. And they have just completely obliterated their offense at that position. I'm not even sure adding Dansby Swanson and Cody Bellinger makes up for it. I think that they are a worse offensive team at this moment in time just by losing Willson Contreras there.
I actually could not agree with you more. I thought it was their worst offseason move by far. In an offseason with some puzzling moves. They spent money on pitchers, spent money on other position players, but didn't lock up a guy that really has been one of their strongest players for years. And at a premium position like catcher, I personally don't get it from a baseball standpoint, and it's awful for them from a fantasy standpoint as well.
I mean, I can tell you what I've heard from people in and around the team. I know they wanted to go defense first there. They wanted to get more of that framing magic or whatever you get back there, game planning, those types of things. I think that that's a little misguided because Willson Contreras was not great at that in 2022. And he also wasn't great at it in, I think, 2019 or 2018. But if you look at his career as a whole, his metrics there are either like 50th percentile, 60th percentile, and sometimes really bad, right? Like he's never going to be an elite framer. He's never going to be your elite defensive catcher, but he's managed to hold his own, or he's been very bad for most of his career. And I think that that's more honestly an indict on the Cubs' ability to develop that catching framework and system, and the fact that they let a premium bat go and didn't replace it, right? Like you have to replace that offense somewhere. Wilson Contreras, one of the things that he did last year, I'm basically telling all of your listeners to go draft Wilson Contreras. I think he's the best catcher value on the board. He's kind of my like red line. It's like, if I don't have a catcher and it looks like Wilson Contreras is about to go, I'm going to go scoop up Wilson Contreras. He cut his strikeout rate like 6% last year. He went from striking out like 27% of the time to 21% of the time. He walks a ton. If you're in an OBP league, Wilson Contreras is the dude to go get. And the Cubs are going to miss all of that. Dansby is a high strikeout guy. He strikes out about 27% of the time. They're going to be a real boom and bust type of offense with the number of Ks in that lineup. And they're not going to have a Wilson Contreras on base to drive in. So the Cubs are kind of, they did a lot defensively, and we'll get into that with some of the other signings we're going to talk about in a second, but they've done almost nothing offensively, and you still have to score runs in this game if you would like to win baseball games.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you on Wilson Contreras. One of my favorite guys to draft last year will be continued to be one of my favorite guys to draft this year. Let's move into the infield, and we'll start with the projected first basemen are Patrick Wisdom and Matt Mervis. Wisdom, he is what he is at this point, right? Cheap power. But Matt Mervis is a very, very hot topic. We were at the Arizona Fall League together, got to see him play. What are your thoughts on Matt Mervis?
Yeah, let me actually give Patrick Wisdom one plug before we move on to Matt Mervis. Patrick Wisdom cut his K rate pretty substantially in 2020. 25, 30 home runs in a given season. The thing about his projections that I don't really buy, they show a pretty big drop off in his isolated power at the moment, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. He's always had an absurdly high ISO in the minors and with the Cubs, so I think the power is real, and I don't think that drop off is going to happen. I think the threat for Wisdom is playing time, as you mentioned, because Matt Mervis looks like the real deal. I'm so intrigued by him. I loved seeing him in the fall league. He was the MVP of the Fall Stars game, hit a home run and drove in Jordan Walker, which was some really fun drama to see in person. But the thing that really got to me about Matt Mervis is what he did with his K rate as he jumped levels last season. He started in high A last season with a K rate of 24.1%, in double A at a K rate of 20%, and triple A it was down to 14.6%. And at one point in the fall league, he had more home runs than strikeouts, and he had like 7 home runs over the course of like a month in the fall league. And it was just like, he's only struck out 6 times and he has 7 home runs. Incredible. That job is Mervis's to lose. The question then becomes, what happens to Wisdom and his playing time? Because he's got some competition at third base from Christopher Morel.
Yeah, I really like Patrick Wisdom as a kind of cheap power source, as you mentioned, and I do think he kind of gets a little bit underrated. I do worry about the playing time. Like, is Mervis going to DH? Or is Wisdom going to DH? Morel looks like he's going to get a shot to play third. I don't think Morel's pretty good. You and I'll have that discussion here in a moment. But I do worry about the playing time. Mervis, though, I'm all in on Mervis. I think he is legit. He was great to watch at Arizona Fall League. Like you said, showed some pretty impressive contact ability with that power. And it seems like, as things stand right now, unless the Cubs bring in just a random person to block him, looks like he's going to be on that opening day roster and playing every day. I think he, even though the price has gone up, I still think it's a pretty good price. Let's talk about Christopher Morel, because I am very, very afraid of him from a fantasy perspective. He had the worst zone contact in all of baseball last season. There is power. There is some speed. He seems like a really fun guy to be on a team with, and he seems like he is soaking up everything he can from the major league talent around him. But man, those plate skills are scary.
Okay, I adore Christopher Morel, and I want the Cubs to give him a lot of runway, because frankly, with the team where it's at right now, this is exactly the time to let Christopher Morel do his thing, and you see if he's really got it, like if he can actually pull it together. He was 22 last season. He went straight from AA to the majors. And so I think a lot of what you're seeing in the plate skills that you're talking about was actually him jumping. He skipped AAA entirely and just went straight to the majors and started hitting, which is, when you think about it, kind of incredible. He really struggled against off-speed and breaking stuff. He's great against fastballs. And so I think that is an adjustment that Christopher Morel is going to have to make. But he's only 23 years old, and I would like to see him get a shot to make that adjustment. Like, there's nothing in his profile that leads me to believe he can't do that. I think he just got a little exposed at the major league level. Here are the two things that make me just over the moon excited about Christopher Morel. His sprint speed is in the 88th percentile according to StatCast. His barrel rate is in the 91st percentile according to StatCast, and his max exit velocity is in the 88th percentile according to StatCast. Those are raw skills that are like Javi Baez-esque, right? Like, those are tools that if he can get the control and learn how to adapt better against different pitches, he is going to be not just an everyday player, not just like a good util guy who can slot in a lot of different positions. He's a potential star. Those are some Julio Rodriguez types percentile numbers on those skills. I'm not saying he's Julio Rodriguez, so please don't quote me on that, dear listeners. But I do think that the potential is off the charts. And I've watched that dude hit some loud home runs. Like, we're talking wavelength length home runs, and he can run a lot and hit, and the arm plays. I mean, I think his arm speed was also way off the charts. Yeah, 99th percentile arm speed according to StatCast. So Christopher Morel has some tools, and I want the Cubs to give him some runway, but that probably means Patrick Wisdom loses some playing time.
Yeah, I don't think you can deny that Christopher Morel has pretty good tools. The problem is, if you can't make contact, that you're not going to be able to unlock those tools. The upside is there. To me, he's not going to end up on any of my fantasy teams this year because I want a guy that has a little bit better contact ability. But this is one that could definitely be eating my words at the end of the year. Another guy that I might be eating my words at the end of the year is Nico Hoerner. I don't think Nico Hoerner is that interesting for fantasy, but people seem to really love him. So am I wrong?
Okay, let me tell you what I think Nico Hoerner is. I think Nico Hoerner is a 10 to 15 home run guy who is also going to steal you 10 to 15 bags. And he's probably going to hit for average. And by hit for average in today's game, I mean, like, he's going to hit over 280. That, to me, given the fact that he is going to play every day at second base, because he was a Gold Glove caliber defender at shortstop last year. People, like, he didn't make the nomination list for Rawlings for hashtag reasons, but the man had the second most outs above average at shortstop behind Dansby Swanson. So he is a premier defender, and he's moving to a much easier position. He's going to be in the lineup every single day. That contact ability, I think batting average is one of those places where you need to invest a little bit. Like, you need to find a guy who has a shot to hit 300. They're just so rare in today's game. And Nico can do that, but he can do that with some pop. In my opinion, Nico Hoerner is what everybody was dreaming Nick Madrigal would be once upon a time, when they were talking about like the contact ability of Nick Madrigal and he doesn't have enough power and this, that, and the other thing, except Nico is a better defender and he hits the ball a lot farther. So he's actually going to hit you doubles and triples and home runs rather than just singles like Nick Madrigal.
I actually like that kind of comparison right there, because I think everybody was really, really excited by Nick Madrigal. But, you know, if you can't get the ball into the outfield, it's going to be really hard to kind of take advantage of that hit tool. And I think that's what we've seen with a guy like Madrigal. I think maybe I'm being a little too hard on Hoerner. I do love guys with good hit tools. And what does Hoerner have? He has a good hit tool. 94% zone contact last year is elite. He does have speed. Maybe I am selling him a little bit short. So I'm gonna have to readjust that in my ranks a little bit. It just feels so high. I really thought we'd be getting him around pick 200, and we're getting around pick 140, and like that just feels like, oh, that's a price to pay.
I've done 3 gladiator drafts so far this offseason, and the first half of draft champions that we started at First Pitch Arizona that I haven't finished yet. And I don't think I have Nico on any of those teams, because I agree with you that a 140 ADP is a little bit high for the skill set that I'm talking about. But if you need a shortstop, if you get to that or a middle infielder at that point, and you really need average, and you're hoping to get average with at least 10 home runs, like he's going to hit you more home runs than a Michael Brantley is, in my opinion. Like, I think that Nico's not a bad guy to get that from, and he's going to be not just in the lineup every day. He's one of the 3 best bats on this team. Like, he's going to hit high in the order. He's going to be on base a lot. Whatever runs the Cubs drive in, and I'm not saying there will be a lot of them, but there will be some, Nico will probably be scoring them.
You did mention Nick Madrigal. Is that kind of fairy tale just over at this point?
I think Nick Madrigal is a trade chip at this point in time. I think that if you look at the Cubs offseason moves that were not sort of the premier moves everybody was paying attention to, they just keep picking up these util middle infield type guys. They've got Mastroboni, they've got Zack McKinstry, they've got Rylan Bannon. Like, I mean, these are all just the same guy. They're all like quad A util infielder type guys, so they don't have to worry about Nick Madrigal. Now Nick Madrigal probably still has some pedigree, some prospect pedigree to some teams out there who want that contact skill and believe in it. He hit everywhere that he has ever been, except the last couple of seasons when he's been hurt. And so maybe the Cubs can still get something for Nick Madrigal, but I just don't think he can't play anywhere other than second base, and that job is Nico's now. And he can't be your DH with an OPS in the 550 range. That is just that's not tenable.
Yeah. All right, let's finish out the infield with Dansby Swanson, the big off-season acquisition. I get the feeling you don't love it as much as I do. I like this signing for you guys. I know that you wanted Wilson Contreras. The Cubs should have gotten both, to be honest. But yes. I like Swanson.
Okay. And I feel bad about doing this because when I originally envisioned us having this conversation, I was going to talk about how I'm so jealous y'all got Carlos Correa and we got Dansby Swanson instead. And now the Correa thing has turned into a total epic. I don't even know. It's just an epic at this point. It's an epic saga. Somebody's going to turn it into a Netflix series. I'm going to watch the hell out of it. I like Dansby Swanson as a guy who is like a mid-tier signing for a team when they've got a blue chip, surefire franchise star in front of him. And I just don't see him as the franchise, face of the franchise. Player. And I think he is not the guy that you build the next great Cubs team around.
Yeah, I get that. I still think though he's a guy who can just be your anchor at shortstop for the next 7 years or ever.
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, I was talking about this on the RotoWire podcast about a month ago. I'm not even sure that Dansby is the best shortstop on the Cubs right now. Him and Nico were pretty close in terms of outs above average last year. Dansby had 21. I think Nico had 17. But Dansby, like most of Dansby's outs above average came to his right. They didn't go to his left, and they didn't come from deep in the hole. He also has one of the weaker arms at shortstop in the major leagues. And I'm like, Nico is better than him in both arm strength and in terms of outs above average directionally. Like, he didn't have more outs above average total, but he was better in the hole. He was better to his left. I don't know. I love them as the up the middle defensive combo. And I think they might actually be in the wrong spots.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think Swans is going to stick there because of that contract.
For sure.
You might be right. But it is a good, kind of up the middle defense for those pitchers that they added. We'll get to those guys in a sec, but let's start with the outfielders. Ian Happ, I feel like he went from being everybody's darling to now a little bit underrated. Where are you at on Ian Happ?
I think he's totally underrated. I have been waiting for the Ian Happ who showed up in 2022 to show up full time for years now. I've written pieces on it. Like, I do believe there's an old piece titled, "Will the Real Ian Happ Please Stand Up?" Because the man was just so volatile in terms of his strikeout rates, his power. When he was good, he was MVP caliber. And when he was bad, he was unrosterable, right, for a fantasy team. I think that Ian Happ found that middle ground in 2022 and added Gold Glove defense with it, which means he's going to play a lot in left field. If you recall last year at this time, if you were talking to a Cubs analyst about left field, the question was, does Ian Happ even have a job? Is he going to lose that job to Clint, now Jackson Frazier? Is he going to lose that job to Harold Ramirez? Does he have a job? And now that job is clearly Happ's. Nobody is taking time there. Christopher Morel might see a spot start out there to give Happ a day off, but that's Happ's job. He's a switch hitter. He's still relatively young. My question is, if the Cubs are not going to extend him, and I think that they should engage with him in extension talks this offseason, they should probably trade him because they have a lot of outfield depth in the minor leagues. And Ian Happ's trade value will never be higher than right now. It can only go down if he struggles at the start of 2023.
I think that's a really good point. And we've seen them do it with other stars, kind of trade them away. So, I mean, obviously Ian Happ isn't off the table in those kind of negotiations. A guy you guys brought in, Cody Bellinger. I love this deal for you guys. 1-year deal, very low risk, but huge amount of upside that you can flip at the deadline if you guys aren't in a playoff spot, if he's good. And if it's not, oh, well, it was just like $10 million for a year. So, or whatever it was for 1 year. Are you drafting Cody Bellinger in fantasy though? Because he has been a huge bust the last couple of years.
Yeah, so Cody Bellinger, I love the signing for the Cubs too. I think he makes them defensively in center field a much better team than what they had when they were like running Christopher Morel and Rafael Ortega. And I don't even remember. I think Jason Hayward played a bit of center last year, and yikes, let's not do that. The thing that I wonder about here, are the Cubs really the team to fix Cody Bellinger's swing? Like, does anybody believe that if the Dodgers couldn't fix Cody Bellinger's swing, the Cubs are going to do it? The last time, the Cubs had like 7 different hitting coaches in the last 9 seasons. The last guy they tried to tinker with a swing on was Jason Hayward, who incidentally the Dodgers are trying to fix right now. The Cubs are going to pay $39.5 million this season for the combination of Jason Hayward in a minor league deal with the Dodgers and Cody Bellinger in a major league deal with the Cubs to see who can fix a swing. And frankly, my money is on the Dodgers fixing Jason Hayward before the Cubs fix Cody Bellinger, but I would love to be proven wrong there.
There was a video of him looking like he had retooled the swing. It was like not even a 30-second video. And like it got me a little excited. I really wish the Giants had signed him. He would have been great in San Francisco. Obviously, he doesn't want to go and try to hit in Oracle. I think it's a lot better to hit in Wrigley. So he's trying to get that long-term deal next year after coming back and being good. I think if you're ever going to buy back in on Bellinger, I think now's the time, right? This is about as cheap as he's ever going to be, unless he is just completely broken. I have a hard time giving up on him. He at worst will play every single day because that amazing defense, and he can be an accumulator. But I think this is a good year to gamble on Bellinger after the last few years. There's going to be a lot of people feeling burnt that are just going to take him completely off their draft list. So I'm going to take the gamble a couple times.
I mean, I'll take the discount on Cody Bellinger in my drafts for sure, but I don't know how much I trust the Cubs to fix something that the Dodgers didn't.
Yeah. Usually the Dodgers are pretty good at fixing things, so if they can't fix it, it may actually be broken. Seiya Suzuki may be my favorite player to draft this year. I don't think people realize how good he was in the second half after coming back from injury. He's the only player in Major League Baseball with a top 25 zone contact percentage and a top 25 barrel percentage in the second half. I think Seiya Suzuki is underrated in spite of a pretty inflated draft cost right now.
I love Seiya Suzuki, and I totally believe in him. A couple of reasons why. There's a Fangraphs community piece, like the community blogs over there, by a guy, I think it's Hiroshi. I'm going to mess this up. I will send a link to you so you can put it in the show notes because I don't have it immediately in front of me at the moment. But it's awesome. And what he did was he looked at the last seasons that players had in the MPB before they came over, and then he looked at their first couple of seasons in MLB so that you get not just that first year where people have to adjust, but you can sort of see what they do over time. Seiya Suzuki was a better pure hitter in Japan than Shohei Ohtani comparatively. And Shohei Ohtani also struggled a little bit as he got used to pitching here in the States. And guess what? Shohei Ohtani is just fine now. I think Seiya Suzuki is poised for a monster breakout. The auction calculator currently shows him as a $15.7 player, right between Kyle Schwarber and Byron Buxton. And I actually think that might be a little underrated. I think Seiya Suzuki is going to play every day. I think you're talking a 2020 potential type of guy, and there could even be more power there. The contact is great. And I love Seiya Suzuki, and I hope to get him on a bunch of teams.
Yeah, me as well. So hopefully won't be in too many drafts together. so I don't have to overpay for my Seiya Suzuki love. Any interest in Zack McKinstry or Brennen Davis? Are they interesting for fantasy for this year?
I don't have any interest in Zack McKinstry. Like, I understand what the Cubs are trying to do there. They're trying to do it with Mastrobuoni and Bannon, and they just keep drafting quad A utility type guys. The thing I worry about with Zack McKinstry is I worry that the Cubs see Christopher Morel in the same category as Zack McKinstry, and I worry that could impact Morel's playing time. And so I think Morel needs some running room in order to fix the off-speed and breaking issues that we were talking about earlier. And if he's not going to get that at the majors because the front office really wants to see what they have in McKinstry or Mastrobuoni or whatever, then I'd rather he go to AAA and get to work that out so that he can come back at his age 24 season and just rake, because I think Morel has a ton of potential. Brennen Davis is this is heartbreaking for me. I have Brennen Davis on my one and only dynasty team. I love Brennen Davis. I want Brennen Davis to come up and just rake for the Cubs. But there was a note from Sahadev Sharma this fall that the reason he was limited in the AFL, which the Cubs had been describing as general soreness publicly for a really long time, was actually a stress reaction in his back. And a stress reaction is a lot different than general soreness, right? And so this is, to be clear, this is different than the injury that he had in 2022, where they found a vascular issue that was pressing on a nerve and they removed that, and then the nerve pain went away. This is distinct from that. But it seems like he may have ramped up a little bit too fast in the AFL when he was coming back from that. And there's a stress reaction now. For people who don't know, a stress reaction is a precursor to a stress fracture. He does not have a stress fracture in his back. He has a stress reaction, but that can mean a lot of different things. Like, you don't know how close he is to that. And that injury is a lot more concerning than anything that's happened with Brennen Davis before. I am holding on to him in my dynasty teams. I'm not drafting him currently in redraft leagues. And I'm going to see what happens. There's a very real possibility we won't see him in spring training. And if we don't see him in spring training, there's no shot that the Cubs are going to call him up before the All-Star break. Just zero.
All right. Yeah, I agree with you on Davis. Like, I think he's a little bit ways away because of the injuries. McKinstry was someone I was really, really interested in before the Cubs made the Swanson move, before the Cubs made the Cody Bellinger move. It was like, oh, he could just be a super utility guy. He led off some at the end of last season. I was like, hey, this could be a sneaky leadoff guy. Obviously not as impactful as Cedric Mullins, but in that same type of vein where, hey, like, look, at the end of the season, he was leading off, and then he had this big breakout. Now he's blocked. Like, he just doesn't have any place to play until there's an injury or someone really, really kind of doesn't pan out. So RIP to my early Zack McKinstry shares. Let's move into the rotation where they picked up Jameson Taillon. They still have Marcus Stroman. The corpse of Kyle Hendricks is still around. They brought in Drew Smyly for some reason. What are they doing, and who are the guys that you're interested in for fantasy?
Look, love somebody as much as Jed Hoyer loves number 3 starters who pitch to contact, right? Like, the Cubs have built an entire rotation out of dudes who are ground ball, contact pitchers, not a ton of strikeouts, would be a great number 3 anywhere else, but the Cubs just have 8 of them, right? That's like what they do now. I think that I like these pitchers a lot, given the current defensive situation for the Cubs. And I think all of them, including some names you haven't mentioned yet, could be sneaky draft values if you're drafting in a redraft league, because I don't think the Cubs currently have a set 5. Like, I think what they've got is more of a set 7, maybe even a set 8 of guys who can give you 5-6 innings of low scoring baseball. You just might not get a lot of strikeouts out of it. So this should not be the rotation you look to for swing and miss type of stuff outside of a couple of names. Justin Steele, I think, can give you a little bit of swing and miss, and I think is ready to take a step to the next level. I'm really excited for Justin Steele and already have him on a couple of teams. I think Hayden Wesneski, who you did not mention, who's currently kind of on the outside looking in at that number 5, is going to fight his way into that starting rotation. He was really good at the end of last season and actually threw more innings than Justin Steele did last year when you combo his AAA and Major League Baseball time. So I think that there's less of an innings concern for me with Wesneski than there is with Steele. But outside of Wesneski and Steele, who both do have some out pitches that can get some swing and miss, most of these guys you're looking at, I don't know, like a 7K per 9, an 8K per 9. and a lot of quick outs. And that's a good way to win baseball games if you can score runs. I think the Cubs have forgotten the you have to score runs part of this equation. And so that's great for a fantasy team. I just think it's not great for a real life baseball team. This team still needs an ace, and they don't really seem to have one that they're developing. So I'm not sure what the pitching philosophy is.
Yeah, I really don't understand the pitching philosophy from a real baseball perspective. From a fantasy perspective, some of them are interesting. I've never really been a Stroman guy, but like I think the defense behind him is definitely going to pick him up as long as he's healthy. I think he'll be very productive. I love Jameson Taillon. Like just how many innings are you going to get from him? He's a long history of injury issues. But for what he is and where he's going in drafts, like I think he's actually a really nice value. Justin Steele, I think, is the quote unquote steal of this group from a fantasy perspective. I completely agree with you. Love the strikeout upside on him. I think he really took a nice step forward. And I think kind of overlooked because the Cubs were mediocre to bad last year. So Wesneski is an interesting guy. I'm not as big of a fan as you are or as my co-host Paul Sporer. And now he's blocked because I don't know what the Cubs are doing bringing in Drew Smyly. I was like, okay, this is going to be Wesneski or it's going to be Keegan Thompson, kind of fifth starter job. Smyly won't stand in the way for long if he does it all. So, like, I think if you're looking for a sneaky guy, Wesneski could be sneaky.
I'm not worried about Wesneski being blocked, mainly because I see injury risks all over this top five. You already talked about Taillon, although I will note when I was doing my by the numbers, the Taillon signing by the numbers, just to sort of see where that came from. He did change his delivery pretty considerably after the second Tommy John to try to prevent some of those injuries, and he hasn't had those injury issues since. So hopefully that's a sustainable change. I hate to say this, I love Kyle Hendricks. The days when all Kyle Hendricks did was get guys out and he was just kind of like a mini Greg Maddux were some of my favorite baseball games to watch. Always love going to the ballpark on a Kyle Hendricks day. Kyle Hendricks is currently doing some driveline work trying to get his fastball back up to 88 because right now there's not enough difference between the fastball and the changeup for the changeup to be effective. And if he can do that, I think he can be Kyle Hendricks of old. But the idea that the guy is trying to get his fastball back up to 88 miles per hour just crushes me as a fan of the Chicago Cubs and as a girl who loves Kyle Hendricks. And so I think that there's some real potential that Kyle Hendricks doesn't come back. I think that Drew Smyly has had some innings concerns and has not pitched a ton in the last couple of seasons, right? He didn't pitch a full load with the Cubs in 2022. So I think Wesneski is going to get his starts and he may just fight his way into this rotation. He was a really good starter for the Cubs last year.
I know Kyle Hendricks has a vesting option for 2024. Is it like an innings thing? Because could this be something where the Cubs say, hey, we're not going to let you get to that vesting option. And then there's your, shot for Keegan Thompson or for Wesneski.
That could be it. But honestly, I think that if Kyle Hendricks is showing flashes that he might get to that vesting option, that what the Cubs, and I'd have to look up the contract, so I don't quote me on that it's an innings option. But I think that the Cubs might wind up in a position where they just trade Kyle Hendricks. It's a really attractive contract. I don't see this team being in contention in July and August. I think they're going to trade again, which is why I mentioned trade possibilities with Happ and unfortunately with Hendricks as well, which was just killer to me. That's the last member of your 2016 World Series core. I need Jed Hoyer to go take some extension lessons from Alex Anthopoulos down in Atlanta because the man does not get extensions done with homegrown talent. And I don't know why.
The vesting option, I just looked it up. It vests if he finishes top 3 in the Cy Young.
I think that seems unlikely.
Yeah, otherwise it becomes a club option. So I think the Cubs are good there. So moving on into the bullpen, is there a closer? Who is the closer? If it's fantasy, who are you drafting?
So I have one share of Cody Hoyer right now because I think Cody Hoyer is probably going to be back in June, and I think that he was part of the return for Craig Kimbrell. If you are a White Sox fan, you might have watched Cody Hoyer light up some radar guns and some stuffed metrics back in the day, but he's been out for a full season, so most people have forgotten about him. I think that at the end of the season, I would not be stunned if Cody Hoerner had the most saves for the Chicago Cubs, but he's a guy that I'm just kind of holding on to in draft champions leagues right now and crossing my fingers. There are a couple of other options here. I think that for the start of the season, the Cubs are going to try a platoon at closer where they have Adbert Alzolay and Brandon Hughes sort of combo there. Brandon Hughes is really, really good stuff, lefty with a nice slider. And Adbert Alzolay gets righties out like it's his job and has the worst left-handed splits in baseball, or did at least when he was a starter. So I think you could platoon that situation with Alzolay and Hughes. I actually think Alzolay in the pen and in a closer position could be a sneaky good bullpen arm. The stuff is really good, but he's had so many injuries trying to start over the years. I'm very interested to see what he does there. And then, of course, the Cubs just signed Brad Boxberger, who has closing experience, not recently. He closed in 2015 and 2018, but he does have a couple of 30-plus save seasons under his belt. And that is exactly the type of thing the Cubs love to do, a one-year contract for a guy who can kind of close, and then you turn him into prospects at the deadline. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them just kind of go situational and early on have Alzolay, Hughes, and Boxberger sort of in there depending on the matchups. And then they see what Cody Hoerner can do once he's healthy.
Yeah, I'm staying away from the situation in fantasy. Just straight up avoiding it. I might throw a dart on Alzolay at some point, like really, really late, or something like that. But like I agree. Like Cody Hoerner could absolutely lead the team in saves and not pitch until July. Like, I mean, that's that's not something I want to invest in March. So just stay away from it. That's going to do it for this episode. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Justin. This is a blast. Love chatting with you always.
Absolutely. You're one of my favorite people in the industry to talk to. It was a pleasure to get to meet you in person at Arizona Fall League. Everybody should be going to the Arizona Fall League to meet people like Sarah. It was just an absolute blast. Remind everybody where you can reach on social media and plug everything you're doing.
Yeah, you can find me at BCB_Sarah. Most of my work I share on Twitter, but I've also been sharing it on Mastodon and Post and, the other places we might go if Twitter eventually collapses. The one thing that I am working on at BCB right now is just a series. I look at every trade and signing that the Cubs do and just sort of do the statistical comparisons there. So be on the lookout for the Tucker Barnhart and Drew Smyly portions of that are coming out soon. I've already written up everything through Dansby Swanson.
Awesome. Sarah, thanks so much for joining me. You can reach me on Twitter at JustinMason, FWFB. I write daily at Fangraphs. I'm doing these 30 podcasts in 30 days on Friends of Fantasy Benefits. Obviously, I'm also on the Sleeper and the Bust podcast. That's going to wrap us up for this episode. For Sarah and myself, thank you for listening. Have a fantastic baseball offseason.